With the NBA draft and free agency dominating sports headlines over the past few days, most college basketball fans have kind of been keeping tabs on where their favorite players were drafted or signed. Now, if you're a Duke Blue Devils fan and watching this video, you likely saw Jared McCain get taken by the 76ers with the 16th pick in the draft. Now, putting all of that NBA news to the side, today I'm here to break down what we have seen so far from these incoming Blue Devils freshmen, veterans, and transfers, as well as give some insight on how I think the Blue Devils will compete next year in the ACC. The Blue Devils had one of the highest ranked groups of incoming freshmen we have ever seen, including consensus number one pick in the country, Cooper Flagg. Now, just about a week ago, the first official team scrimmage highlights dropped on YouTube, and it is safe to say this team is going to be an absolute problem next season. In the starting lineups for the scrimmage, we saw Tulane transfer Zion James, incoming five-star freshman Khaman Maluach and Isaiah Evans, Purdue transfer Mason Gillis, and veteran guard Tyrese Proctor for Team White. Now for Team Blue, the starting lineup consisted of returning guard Caleb Foster, Syracuse transfer Malik Brown, and incoming freshmen Patrick Ngongba, Cooper Flagg, and Khan Knipple. After a while, the teams did switch up their rosters and who was on Team White, who was on Team Blue a little bit, but for the majority of the scrimmage, those were the lineups. Now, right off the bat, we saw flashes of how big an impact Khaman Maluach can be this season. The 7'1" big man is coming from the NBA Academy of Africa and is an absolute monster on both ends of the floor. We saw Khaman and Tyrese Proctor work really fluently together in pick and roll situations. And again, these are just the first couple weeks that these guys are getting to know each other, these freshmen, these freshmen and veterans, the transfers, the veterans. It's a whole new group of guys. Sure, you have a couple guys like Caleb Foster, Tyrese Proctor returning, but you have these transfers, Mason Gillis, Zion James, Malik Brown, and we have all of the five-star freshmen, four-star freshmen, Darren Harris, Patrick Ngongba, Cooper Flagg, Isaiah Evans, Khan Knipple, and it's a lot of freshmen. It's a lot of new guys. It's going to take a little while for these guys to start gelling, but this scrimmage was certainly a good sight to see for Duke basketball fans. I think, again, Tyrese Proctor and the way him and Khaman Maluach kind of work together on that pick and roll, and just Khaman Maluach just takes up so much space in the paint. He is really just a true presence, again, on both ends of the floor. He uses the glass to block shots. He can defend at the perimeter as well, just with his length, and he's going to be an absolute monster next year. I know a lot of people like to look at Cooper Flagg, and he's the one in all the headlines. And yes, Cooper Flagg should be a lottery pick next season. I don't have any doubt in my mind he won't be, but I think a lot of people overlook Khaman Maluach just because of where he came from. He wasn't on the most popular high school team. He was at the Academy of Africa, so not a lot of people knew about him until he really committed to Duke. But he's going to be an absolute monster this season. And also, in my opinion, Tulane transfer Zion James has the potential to be one of the best defenders in the country next year. And me not having seen much of him last season, I was extremely impressed with the way he finished at the rim and defended on both the perimeter and interior. Now, returning Duke guard Caleb Foster also did catch my eye from watching the scrimmage, as he just looked so much more comfortable than last season. Obviously, he had a couple guards that got minutes over him and got more playing time and more experience when it actually came to in-game situations, but I think that he really took last year personal, and I think that he used it as a developmental year to really hone in, get in the gym, work on his game, because with the departure of Jeremy Roach to Baylor and Jared McCain to the draft, he's going to have to kind of be catapulted into a much larger role. But again, it already looks like from the scrimmage and some social media clips and just the way he acts in interviews and stuff that he is prepared to take on that challenge. Now for the Blue squad, Cooper Flagg obviously immediately made his presence felt on campus, doing basically everything we saw him do last season at Montverde. He was explosive with the ball in his hands and stepped outside to shoot the ball from three quite a few times. His fellow incoming Duke freshman Khan Knipple also had a solid performance shooting the ball from outside, and I think he finishes really well in transition. I would say out of these incoming freshmen, him, Khaman Maluach are sort of the two that are the most underrated or not as well known. Darren Harris, Patrick Ngongba both played on one of the best teams in high school basketball. Obviously, everybody in the basketball world knows Cooper Flagg. Most everybody knows Isaiah Evans. So I think that Khaman Maluach and Khan Knipple are kind of the more underrated side of this freshman class, but do not let that trick you. These are two very, very talented players who will definitely crack the rotation and get solid minutes for Duke this year. But as I mentioned before, Zion James, the Tulane transfer, also played really well in the scrimmage, and he mainly caught my attention with, again, his defensive ability. He's a strong guard who can jump out of the gym, and he actually got a number of blocks on some of the Duke big men, such as Khaman Maluach, which, if you look at Zion James's height, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but him compared to Khaman Maluach, who is 7'1", and just an absolute monster in the paint. Zion James is a lead guard, and he was holding his own in the paint against Khaman Maluach on some of those switches. And as I said, Tyrese Proctor and Khaman Maluach ran that pick and roll from the top of the key quite a lot, and so that did force mismatches with Khaman Maluach and Zion James in the paint. But again, for being a guard, his defensive abilities and what he can do on the defensive side of the ball, I think that is what's going to get him solid rotation minutes, and I think that's also what's going to catch the eyes of scouts all over the country from almost every NBA team who are going to be watching this guy play purely because of his energy, his effort, and again, his defensive abilities on the court. Now, big men Malik Brown and Patrick Ngongba also had a few good possessions on the offensive side of the ball, and as a Syracuse basketball fan myself, I think Malik Brown is one of the most underrated players on this roster. His court vision and overall basketball IQ makes him an extremely talented passer and also an extremely talented defender, and I think with the right development, and I think with him being able to play against better competition this offseason with the Duke Blue Devils, I think that he can even become a better rebounder than he was last season for the Orange. It's kind of tough to navigate this roster because there's so many new guys, there's so many incoming freshmen, there's so many transfers. We only have a couple of veterans who are returning, like Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster. So it's going to be difficult to see on the first few days of the season, first few games, who Jon Scheyer ends up putting up in the starting lineup. I think that the only real guarantees right now are Tyrese Proctor and Cooper Flagg, I would say, I don't think there's really anybody guaranteed, but I would say Cooper Flagg's going to start on day one, and I don't see a reason Tyrese Proctor was going to come off the bench at all, considering he didn't last season. But other than that, those other three spots are up for grabs. I think that it's going to take a lot of effort from these guys to really certify themselves in the starting lineup come the opening of the season. And I think that Jon Scheyer is going to have a couple of really difficult decisions to make. But at the end of the day, even if they're coming off the bench, they're going to have to make a big impact to make this team have a deep run in March Madness. And I think that every single player on this roster is going to make an impact in some sort of way, whether that's in-game in regular season or just behind the scenes in practice, sharpening up their skills for next season as we saw Caleb Foster do for this year. I think the Blue Devils are a championship contending team for next season, and I think that is largely due to their coaching staff. Head coach Jon Scheyer and his staff went out on the recruiting trail and absolutely dominated, bringing in the number one class of 2024. Not only did they excel recruiting high school talent, but they also went into the transfer portal and got some elite high-level players to fill in the areas of concern from last season. Malik Brown from Syracuse will be a key rotation role player. Zion James brings defensive intensity that, in my opinion, I think Duke lacked last year. And Mason Gillis from Purdue was one of the best three-point shooters in the country at 46.8 last season. As for the freshman class, Cooper Flagg, Isaiah Evans, Khaman Maluach, Khan Knipple, Patrick Ngongba, and Darren Harris all have NBA-level ceilings, and some are projected lottery picks for next year's draft. I know we didn't talk much about Darren Harris today, but that is because he fractured his non-shooting hand over the summer, and he's currently working back to a full recovery following his surgery a few weeks ago, but I'm sure that we'll see a lot of him. He's an absolute sharpshooter out of PVI High School in the DMV area, along with Patrick Ngongba. They were high school teammates. But at the end of the day, this freshman class is going to make absolute waves next season, not only in the ACC, but just in college basketball in general. I'm a Syracuse basketball fan, so I don't like to give Duke their credit, but the job that Jon Scheyer and the coaching staff did this season is something to not be taken lightly. I think that they have built something really, really special on campus at Duke, and I think that there's no doubt that this team is going to make a run in March Madness next season. The only real errors or reason that I can see them not contending for a championship is just due to their lack of experience. They have a lot of freshmen who are going to be in key moments next season, but again, with the age of social media and how it's grown up, I think that most of these freshmen have been under the bright lights before. Cooper Flagg, Isaiah Evans, Patrick Ngongba, Darren Harris, they've had those packed gyms. They've had those high levels of pressure and stuff like that. So I think that Duke is going to be an extremely talented roster next season. And it's going to be fun to keep watching these scrimmage highlights and the social media highlights that they put out, because it's cool to kind of see how the team's starting to gel with all these new guys and how they're starting to fit in and build that team chemistry. But if you enjoyed today's video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel down below. I haven't been doing as much commentary videos. It's been a lot of videography, but we're going to get back into it with college basketball season slowly and steadily approaching. So I'd appreciate if you guys subscribe to the channel, and thank you guys for watching.